By 4 in the afternoon on a summer day in 1984, every kid in the neighborhood was somewhere, on a bike, in a friend's basement, lying on the carpet in front of the television. Nobody was tracking them, nobody needed to. There was no phone to call. Just an unspoken agreement that the world was safe enough to get lost in. Most of what made that decade feel the way it did has quietly slipped out of the world. This is the list of things you forgot you missed. In 1983, parents were getting into physical fights in toy store aisles, not over something valuable. Over a soft-faced doll with a yarn hairstyle, a birth certificate, and a name like Otis Bernard or Cornelia Adelaide. Cabbage Patch Kids were not just a toy, they were an adoption. You did not buy one, you took one home. The scarcity was completely real. Stores could not keep them stocked, and the kids who got one for Christmas that year never forgot it. But the Cabbage Patch riot was just 1 week in December. The real ritual started months earlier when something arrived in the mailbox. It arrived in the mailbox like a piece of official business, thick enough to use as a doorstop, heavy enough that you felt it before you saw it. The Sears Christmas Wish Book. Most kids did not read it. They worked it. You went through every page with a pen, circling everything you wanted, pressing hard enough that the marks bled through to the next page. You were not making a list. You were filing a formal request with the universe. Your parents quietly retrieved it after you went to bed, flipped to the circled pages, and made their own entirely different decisions. And if the wish book was where you filed your requests, there was one toy on almost every list that nobody could fully explain. You grabbed both arms and you pulled. That was it. Stretch Armstrong could go from about 15 inches to nearly 4 feet if you committed to it. And the material had a specific resistance, firm at first, then suddenly giving way. That made you feel like you were doing something you probably should not be doing. Every kid who owned one eventually wondered what was inside. Nobody found out until someone pulled too hard or left it in a hot car. The answer was corn syrup, just corn syrup. And that was just what they put in your hands. What they put on your back was a whole different story. There was no jacket in the 1980s that carried more social weight than the members only. It had a slim cut, an epaulette on the shoulder, and a little buckle at the collar that served absolutely no functional purpose. They came in every color: camel, red, navy, and slate gray. And the men who wore them did so with the quiet confidence of someone who had been personally admitted to something exclusive. Every dad seemed to own at least one. Every kid wanted to borrow it. If members-only jackets were the decade's quiet status symbol, parachute pants were the opposite of quiet about everything. Shiny, rustling, covered in zippers that led nowhere. They made a sound when you walked that announced your arrival from 2 hallways away. Breakdancers had them first in the early 1980s. Nobody questioned whether they were practical. Nobody asked what the extra zippers were for. They looked like the future. They felt like wearing a tent. And for about 4 years in the 1980s, they were completely cool. What you wore got you noticed in the hallway. What you carried got you noticed the second you sat down. There was nothing quite like the first day of school with a brand new Trapper Keeper under your arm. Thick Velcro closure, colorful abstract designs on the cover, and a system of folders and pockets inside that made a 10-year-old feel like they were managing something genuinely important. The Velcro rip when you opened it in a quiet classroom was loud enough to turn heads 3 rows over. A good Trapper Keeper cover with the right geometric pattern and the right color scheme was a personality statement. It told the whole class exactly who you were before you said a single word. Teachers hated the Trapper Keeper. But there was something else in that backpack they hated even more. In 1985, Topps released a trading card series that every parent in America, immediately tried to ban. Garbage Pail Kids were Cabbage Patch Kids put through a horror movie. They had the same round faces and the same yarn hair, except now they were melting, exploding, or being eaten by something. Kids collected them obsessively, traded them at school, and kept them hidden from adults who did not understand the appeal. Several school districts banned them outright, which of course made every kid want them more. The other half lived in the pages of a book, and it put you in charge of whether you survived. Choose Your Own Adventure books put you inside the story. Second person, present tense. Every few pages, a decision that sent you to a completely different part of the book. Most paths ended badly. You fell into a cave, got captured by pirates, made the wrong call at the critical moment, and died on page 47. So you put your finger on the last choice and went back. Every kid who grew up with these books developed the same habit, reading with one thumb, permanently bookmarking the page before the decision, just in case. Every story in those books ended with a choice. The biggest choice of an 80s childhood had no book, just a sky getting darker. There was one rule in the 1980s that every kid understood without being told twice. You could go anywhere, do anything, disappear for the entire afternoon, as long as you were home when the streetlights came on. No phone to check in with, no way for your parents to see where you were. Just a bike, a neighborhood, and an unspoken agreement that nobody needed to spell out. Most kids today will never know what it was. That freedom existed outside, but there was one place inside where an 80s kid felt just as in control. The first computer in the house was usually a Commodore 64, and it sat on a desk in the spare room like a piece of serious equipment the whole family was supposed to share, but kids inevitably commandeered it. At school, the computer lab meant one thing: Oregon Trail. You named your party after your friends, made your own decisions, and watched them die of dysentery one by one. It was the first time a screen made kids feel genuinely in control. And somehow the decade that gave kids all of that, the freedom, the chaos, the corn syrup, also managed to change what the whole family did on a Saturday night. When MTV launched in August of 1981, the very first words spoken on air were, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll." Then they played a video, then another one, then another after that. Kids sat in front of the television and watched it the way previous generations watched variety shows. Michael Jackson's Thriller did not just get played on MTV, it was an event. The whole neighborhood talked about it the next day at school. The screen gave you a world to disappear into, but the world you actually grew up in had no screen at all. Just a window, a highway, and nobody watching. There is a generation of people who spend entire road trips lying across the back window ledge of a station wagon, watching the highway disappear behind them. No seatbelt, no car seat, no one particularly worried about it. The 1980s operated on a parenting philosophy that would make today's parents break into a cold sweat. Kids roamed, kids fell, kids figured it out. Latchkey kids let themselves in after school, made their own snacks, and watched TV until dinner without an adult in the house. Nobody called it neglect. Everyone called it Tuesday. And somehow, every single kid who lived it turned out just fine. Whatever just came back to you right now, that's the part nobody talks about anymore. Tell it below.